Thank you, Susan, for reminding us of why we're here. You mentioned this is an extended family, and indeed it is. And families step up when family members need help. And that's exactly what this organization has done for over 100 years. And for that, we are forever grateful. The lives that you touch day in and day out. And you may think we don't see you, but we do. And we are so deeply appreciative of what you do here at Goddard Riverside and other partners like Jacqueline Simone, our policy director for the Coalition of Homeless. I want to thank her for her unwavering commitment to make sure that everyone has the dignity of a roof over their heads. So thank you and all the advocates who are here today. It has been a long journey for many of you, and I thank you for never giving up the fight. You are the ones that the people you're representing look to carry on for them when they're having to deal with whatever adversity the day may bring for them. You are out there as their voices, and I'm grateful for that as well. I'm also grateful for incredible elected leaders that we have in this district, true champions who, again, will make sure that they take an idea that they learn from the community, the people they represent with such heart and soul, and they take that to Albany, and they overcome all the hurdles that exist. And there have been a lot of hurdles over the years to get things done. But the legislature is where the ideas are fermented, and they are developed there, and they get through the process, and they get through hearings, and they get through a vote. And at this point, when it's an opportunity for me to do something which is simply to sign into the law what they did, I say to them, thank you for being such incredible partners. And I'm speaking about, first of all, our senators. Senator Brad Hoylman will be joining, he has joined us, Senator Brad Hoylman, but sponsors of this bill. Brian Kavanaugh, you are a true champion for people in need of housing and insecurity. Thank you, Brian. And our Assembly sponsor, Linda Rosenthal, I know how people feel about their elected leaders here. People don't feel this way all over the state about their elected leaders. I tell you, I've been an elected official for a long time. But when I would walk into a senior center with Linda, even like 7, 8 years ago, and it's just like, who's that lieutenant governor? Linda's here. She's a rock star. So thank you for the connection you've made with your community, because that's what we're seeing here is the love you have for your district realized through legislation that we're working on here today. Also great partners like Senator Robert Jackson, a tremendous advocate for this community. I want to thank you for all you do, Senator Jackson. And I mentioned Senator Hoylman as well. Our borough president, Gail Brewer, who is everywhere all day long. What a leader she has been, a true friend. But I also come on, and Danny O'Donnell's here. Danny, thank you for your work in the Assembly. He makes sure that his district is so well represented in our state legislature. Thank you, Danny O'Donnell. And I come out of local government. I was a council member at one point in my life, and I want to thank Steve Levin for all his work, because a lot of this work does get done at the local level. Steve, thank you for what you do here. Before I get started to talk about the issue at hand, which is really the effect of COVID and how it's had such a paralyzing impact on people who are already housing insecure, and has really taken people who are on the edge, and in many cases they dropped off, no fault of their own. Well, let's go back to why this started, some of it in the first place, the additional stresses created by the pandemic that Susan just spoke about, that people who thought they were going to be okay, but all of a sudden they lose a job and they can't make that payment, and all of a sudden everything that they thought was going to be okay collapses before their eyes, no fault of their own. And this happened to literally thousands of New Yorkers. And the good news is that we've had a vaccine in place now, and I commend the 80% of New Yorkers who are vaccinated. That's statewide. New York City's even higher. I thank them. But I have to say, and I've been warning about this for months now, that we saw a trend happening based on what happened last year, that as we enter the winter months and the holiday seasons, from Thanksgiving, people gather together, people gathering with vulnerable members of the family, the older ones, grandparents, aunts and uncles, all the way through the holidays of December and into New Year's, and all the way up even to Super Bowl weekend, places where people gather, indoors primarily. We had predicted that if we didn't get more people vaccinated and ultimately boosted, and now with layering on a new variant, where we have 20 cases in New York, but it spreads very quickly, We're entering a time of uncertainty, and we could either plateau here, or our cases could escalate beyond control. We are staggering upward, my friends. I've been watching this closely. We're heading upward in a direction that I find is no longer sustainable. And I've said all along I have two priorities: protect the public health of New Yorkers, but also protect the health of the economy. And one of the reasons we have so many people who are housing insecure and food insecure, are dealing with all the specters of the fallout of the pandemic, mental health crises, suicide is up, addiction, opioid deaths are up. All this is an effect on the human condition because of what we went through in the past. I don't want to go back ever again to that place where people couldn't go to their jobs safely, couldn't congregate, kids couldn't go to schools. That isolation had a devastating effect on the human condition, and we're still dealing with the fallout today. So to avoid that situation, I today am announcing that we are enacting a statewide indoor mask mandate unless a business has a vaccination mandate. Many people in New York City are already dealing with this. Been dealing with it for a while. You've been doing great. And that is why your hospital capacity is good. That's why your vaccination numbers are high. Your infections are not as high as the rest of the state. But the rest of the state now has a wake-up call. I've been warning. I've been saying, if we can't get more people vaccinated or boosted, I have to protect people, but also the economy. I want to make sure that the little businesses that were hurt so hard during the pandemic and has shut down, resulting in their loss of income, but the loss of income of all the people who work for them, we have to prevent that from happening. And that's why just this morning I announced that we're taking that action statewide, and I wanted you to hear that here, and I'll be answering questions on that shortly. So we draw that connection. Thank you. Thank you. My plan is to make it temporary. It starts on Monday. We'll reassess on January 15th, just so businesses have clarity. They don't find out last minute. We've been talking to businesses throughout the week to make sure they know what's happening. So I talked about the pandemic. I talked about the great work that's being done here now. And let's talk about the people who are housing insecure and what we can do to help them. And that's why we're here today. We know that too many New Yorkers missed a paycheck, missed a mortgage payment. We're not able to pay a medical bill that came in. And more than ever, families need to know that they're going to be okay. People just want the confidence to know that they can protect themselves and protect their kids. And we have been taking action. My first days on the job as your governor, and I've been on, I think, less than 4 months, we took major action to make sure that the rent relief money that had been jammed up, $2 billion waiting to go out to people who were deserving. We unclogged that drain. We've got the money flowing out again. Same thing with the excluded worker program to make sure that people who are undocumented could receive money that they desperately needed as well. We also funded legal services for tenants to protect their rights, $25 million to go toward that, and we're looking at increasing that in the future. The Homeowner Assistance Fund, which I just announced, $540 million to people who are homeowners who are having trouble, struggling to make the mortgage payment, who again are looking at possible eviction and losing their home or losing their home through foreclosure. And then there's been the effect on homelessness. You cannot walk the streets of New York without seeing this human catastrophe, this humanitarian crisis. These are God's children as well. They are our fellow brothers and sisters. They deserve the dignity of a roof over their head. And so we have to attack this from many fronts. And I look forward to working with incoming Mayor Eric Adams. We were together last night, and we're going to be sitting down to come up with a cohesive strategy where this is a radical concept, my friends. Radical idea here. But we're going to be working the state of New York, hold on to your seats, and the city of New York will work together. And that's why I want to commend Commissioner Stephen Banks as well for joining us here today and all the work that he has done. His team has been incredible. So we'll deal with the people who are homeless now, But how about stopping more people from becoming homeless? That's where we're headed. That's where we're headed. So we're going to make sure that we have a policy in place, one that was thought of by the two individuals that I recognize, Assemblymember Rosenthal, Senator Brian Kavanaugh. And today, I'm very proud to sign the Family Homelessness and Eviction Protection Supplement Bill into law. And here's the thing. It's this simple. If we want to get people out of shelters, we have to give them enough money to afford the rent, right? You can't just say, go out on the streets, good luck. We understand that the rents are going up. Inflation is going up. The money they thought they had is not going as far as it would have even a few months ago. And so we're going to bring the voucher payment to 100% of the fair market rate set by the federal government. And this, by the stroke of a pen, will allow thousands of more New Yorkers to be able to leave a shelter and go into a home because for the first time they'll be able to afford it. That's what this bill is going to accomplish. The Legal Aid Society predicts that this would help at least 2,300 additional people in addition to the 12,000 who already benefit from this program. And 95% of those people would have been forced to remain in shelters. That's a beautiful image of people being able to pack up and go into a home that they can call their own because we made this change to go to 100% of market value. And we know the communities that have been hardest hit. Just like the pandemic hit the black and brown communities the hardest, the evictions and the loss of ability to afford homes hits the black and brown communities the hardest as well. And that is something, I assure you, that my administration is going to be laser focused on eradicating all those inequities, whether it's the housing insecurity, the health disparities, the education disparities, and making sure that there is no longer a gap based on a community, whether it's a community of color or not. That should no longer be a defining indicator of whether or not people are able to live in a home or not. Let's stop that, and let's stop that right now with this legislation. So, we're not out of the woods. I do see the clearing in the distance. We get more people vaccinated. We get people back to jobs. We get people back to a sense of normalcy. The stresses on everyday human life start to lift. And the image of more people being able to be in homes is something that warms my heart during this holiday season. And let's advocates and all of our elected officials continue to work together to understand why we do what we do. We are literally here on this planet to better the lives of not ourselves, but to better the lives of other people. This step today will go a long way toward giving people a gift that they never expected this holiday season, and that is their own home. And I thank everyone involved. Thank you to our sponsors.
Please welcome to the podium Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal.
Good morning, everyone. I'd first like to thank Susan Matloff-Nieves for her kind words of introduction, and I'd like to thank Dallas Castro and the rest of the staff at Lincoln Square Neighborhood Center, along with Rod Jones, Goddard's executive director, Larry Wood, everyone who's involved with this wonderful organization. I've worked closely with Goddard and Lincoln Square Neighborhood Center for as long as I can remember. Goddard provides the kind of comprehensive, empathetic, whole-person approach to homelessness that we should replicate everywhere. Goddard does homeless outreach, provides supportive and affordable housing, and fights to prevent homelessness via its law project. Lincoln Square Neighborhood Center provides hot meals to food-insecure New Yorkers and dozens of social and enrichment programs designed to keep people connected. They help craft legislation to protect tenants and prevent eviction. They help vulnerable tenants build power and treat every single person experiencing homelessness with value and respect. I cherish Goddard and my partnership with it, and I hold it up as a model of the way that we should approach homelessness as a state. Speaking of approaching homelessness as a state, isn't it wonderful to have a governor who gets it? Today's bill signing represents a departure from the way that we usually approach homelessness as a state. I am so happy to be here in my district with Governor Hochul and an amazing coalition of advocates for the signing of legislation that will change people's lives for the better by raising the amount of a state family homelessness and eviction prevention supplement, Feps, voucher to 100% of fair market levels set by HUD. We will ensure that thousands of vulnerable families, especially families of color headed by women, can pay their rent and be safely housed. As chair of the Assembly Committee on Social Services, I've been working with advocates around the state who are on the front lines of the homelessness crisis. They know, as do we all, just how dire the situation has become. According to the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, nearly 100,000 individuals in New York State, including more than 3,000 children, experienced homelessness on any given day last year. While we don't have accurate post-pandemic count, unemployment combined with ever-increasing rents suggests the number has only risen. And here in New York City, the Coalition for the Homeless reported in August that nearly 48,000 individuals were spending each night in the city shelter system. It is vital that we do more to help get individuals and families off the street into permanent, affordable, or supportive housing. From increasing our investment in the development of affordable and supportive housing to creating new Section 8-like voucher programs to repairing NYCHA housing and increasing the shelter allowance, we can begin to stem the tide on New York's growing homelessness crisis. At the same time, we must also work to ensure that families no longer find themselves behind in rent and on the verge of homelessness. And that's where the Feps voucher program comes in. The Feps voucher program is designed to help people who are at the risk of eviction or those who are in shelter find permanent, affordable housing. The program has long been a lifeline for many families facing threats to their housing stability, including survivors of domestic violence. Until now, the Feps voucher covered only up to about 85% of fair market rent. There is not a single neighborhood in New York City where the median rent for a two-bedroom apartment is affordable to a family with an existing voucher. The legislation that the governor will sign today will increase the Feps voucher amount to cover 100% of fair market rent. Doing so will create more opportunities for families to find homes that are affordable to them with their voucher, and it will provide a lifeline for approximately 2,300 families who will now become eligible for the Feps program. Without these changes, as the governor said, many of these families would become homeless and enter into the shelter system. And by preventing family homelessness and expanding access to the program, we are on track to save the state as much as $10 million because of the reduced reliance on our shelter system. We are now working with a novel concept here, the long game, where we spend money up front to save millions down the road while helping people avert eviction, serious health issues, and homelessness. And that is the right approach for our state to take. Housing, safe, stable, affordable, and permanent housing is health care. and a home base from which to organize all other aspects of a meaningful and productive life. I was honored to work with a coalition of outstanding advocates and organizations, and I'm going to name a few, and I hope I don't miss anyone. First of all, my buddy, Judith Goldner from the Legal Aid Society. Legal Aid Society's lawsuit in the 80s helped to establish today's Feps program. Catherine Trapani from Homeless Services United. Elizabeth Ginsburg from Enterprise Community Partners. Ted Houghton from Gateway Housing. Chris Quinn from WIN. New Destiny Housing, Safe Horizon, Violence Intervention Project, Coalition for the Homeless, Sanctuary for Families, Upper West Side Open Hearts, Shams the Barren Hero, Shams the Homeless Hero. Bronx Works, the Real Estate Board of New York, and so many others who have devoted considerable efforts to see this legislation become law, including our Speaker, Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, who believed in the necessity of advancing this bill and this approach. Now that the voucher amount has been increased, landlords will have full confidence that when they accept a tenant with a voucher, the rent will be paid, and the tenant's voucher will allow them to access previously unattainable, suitable housing. Now, the signing of this legislation signals a new day for New Yorkers at risk of losing their homes. With it, the state of New York recognizes that it has not only a legal duty, but also a moral imperative to provide shelter to those who need it. It recognizes the humanity of people who are experiencing homelessness and demands that, from this point forward, the state prioritize housing and mobilize the resources necessary to end our intractable homelessness crisis. I would like to thank my partner in this effort, Senator Brian Kavanaugh. It's wonderful to work with you, and we do have another housing bill that the governor is considering. And I would like to thank everyone here, but especially the governor. You know, I think it's her third time in the district in the past 3 months, but she always is in this district. And we've developed a great friendship over the years, and truly signing this is changing the game. And we are all so grateful to you. I'm also grateful to my staff, Lauren, Erica, Juliana, Nick. We couldn't do this without them, and I truly love them and appreciate them. And so thank you, Governor, for signing this into law. Thousands of families will be able to sleep safely and stably housed because you signed this bill. Thank you.
Please welcome to the podium Senator Brian Kavanaugh.
Thank you so much. It really is a great pleasure to be with all of you on such a celebratory occasion. As Linda mentioned, there were 100 organizations that backed this bill, numerous people in government that supported it. I'm not going to repeat them all, but I will just second all of the gratitude that has already been expressed so eloquently by the governor and by Linda, and just add that the leader of our House, Andre Stewart-Cousins, and the staff of the Senate really did commit to this. And I want to talk particularly about the governor's role here, because the governor, was humbly said, well, the legislature passed this good idea and all I need to do is sign it. I don't think there's anybody in this room that thought when we passed this bill that it was a foregone conclusion that it would get signed. We know there's been a lot of opposition within the prior administration to this, and this is really one of many, many steps that cumulative really are changing the way we face fundamental problems in the state, particularly problems that deal with intractable problems, homelessness, and with people who are poor and really need our help in this state. So I want to thank the governor for really changing that dynamic and signing this bill today. Now, the governor spoke about the crisis of COVID. We are 21 months into that crisis. It is an ongoing crisis. We still have far too many deaths. It is an economic crisis that continues. But none of us is losing sight of the fact that long before we had the COVID crisis, we had a homelessness crisis and an affordable housing crisis that is not counted in a matter of months, but as a matter of generations. We are in a generational crisis where our city and our state have not succeeded, in spite of great efforts on the part of people like Steve Banks and many other people in this room, of ending this crisis. The step we are taking today is one of many steps that are going to be necessary, but it is a step toward genuinely ending the homeless crisis in this city and in this state, which currently affects on any given day 90,000 people who are experiencing homelessness, and many more people who experience it over the course of a year. I don't need to tell anybody in this room how problematic that is, how disruptive and destructive to people's lives it is when they lose their homes, to their children's education, to their health, and to their basic sense of well-being, and the sense that our society is a place where they are welcome and where people can be stable. And I know there are people in this room who've experienced that homelessness themselves and have gotten through it, but there are so many more who are struggling. We have begun to take the steps under this governor's leadership. During the COVID crisis, we have stabilized, we have avoided that becoming a massive housing crisis through a massive rental subsidy program that this governor got back on track, and through eviction and foreclosure moratorium that we now have in place through January 15th for, again, 22 months. And we have to be looking at what's going to happen in a little more than a month to that. But we've gotten through the short-term housing element of the COVID crisis, but we need to take steps looking forward. We've got an enormous capital budget. We're going to be working with the governor and the legislature to make sure that is a capital budget that is truly up to the work of adding to the stock of affordable housing throughout the state and making sure it's well targeted to people's real needs. But the most direct and immediate thing we can do is work to make sure programs like this one, like Feps, and the other rental assistance programs are working and are providing enough resources to get people to be able to pay their rent and live in permanent housing. This is a big step forward. We are going to be looking in the legislature toward even bigger steps. The goal, it's been a long time since people said end homelessness, and they didn't just mean it as a rhetorical thing, as a hope, as a wish for the long term. We need to end it. We have the resources in this state to do it, and what we're doing today is an example of how to get that done. So I'm very proud to be here. Thank you.
Please welcome to the podium, Jackie Simone.
Good morning. I'll be brief. Thank you to Governor Hochul, Senator Kavanaugh, and Assemblymember Rosenthal for recognizing the vital importance of this legislation and for standing up for the most vulnerable New Yorkers. Thank you also to the many dedicated advocates who called for this bill, including Goddard, WIN, Legal Aid Society, Enterprise, Homeless Services United, Gateway, New Destiny, The Network, and many more. 50,000 people slept in New York City's main shelter system last night. Countless others are on the brink of homelessness, and the housing crisis disproportionately affects Black and Latinx New Yorkers. We must do all we can at every level of government to prevent and address homelessness, and raising these rent subsidies to better align with the actual cost of housing is a critical first step to keep struggling New Yorkers in their homes. Preventing homelessness and helping families move out of shelters is a smart policy that, as Assemblymember Rosenthal said, will save families and save tax dollars at the same time. And this legislation comes at a crucial moment. We thank Governor Hochul for signing this bill and for helping more New Yorkers achieve stable housing. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the podium, Commissioner Stephen Banks.
thank you, Governor, for doing this. I have to say that it's been a long time coming, but you're the one that made this happen. And I'm deeply grateful on behalf of all the people I represent at the Legal Aid Society and on behalf of all the people that I've served as a commissioner in New York City. You know, so many people have been thanked, but as I step back and I see all the faces here and the faces that aren't here who played a role in this, there's so many advocates, there's so many people experiencing homelessness whose voices were heard. The City Council played a major role. But as I think about how government should work, I see two legislators here from the state Senate, Senator Kavanaugh, from the Assembly, Assembly Member Rosenthal. The Speaker isn't here, but he played a role. The Majority Leader isn't here, but she played a role. This is how government should work. The legislature looks for a solution. The governor considers it. The governor acts. The City of New York works together with the governor. It's like right out of fairy tales almost. Except it's real, and it's going to be real for people in this state, in this city, who need this help. You know, with the stroke of the pen, you're going to solve a long time problem with a solution that's been in plain sight for a long time. You know, it's kind of a simple thing. If rents are here and income is here, the gap between income and rent is the homelessness equation that has caused such irreparable harm to so many children and so many adults for so long. But the action that's being taken today will be a step forward to address that harm. And I think it does signal a new day, and it signals an important day for people who depend on government. You know, in the 1930s, people in the state came together and passed a constitutional provision that said the provision of aid and care to the needy would be a government responsibility. That's a provision of the Constitution that is sometimes honored and sometimes not. Today it's being honored, and that's a major step forward. You know, on a personal note, I would say this. In my first month as the commissioner of the New York City Department of Social Services, I asked the state to permit the city to increase the state Feps program, which is what it was called then, to the HUD FMR. That request was not granted. This is my last month as the commissioner of the Department of Social Services. And I have always believed, because I'm an optimist by nature, I wouldn't have been a legal aid lawyer for 33 years, that if you keep working, good things will happen, and everybody in this room and people not in this room worked hard, and you're the person making it happen. On another note, when I go to Paul Weiss soon and return to the practice of law, what a relief not to have to bring this lawsuit.
Please welcome back Governor Kathy Hochul to sign the bill. For those in attendance, please remain seated during the bill signing photos. Please remain seated during the bill signing photos.